pagans go, where the fires are high and the candles glow. Take me down to that magical place where they're dancing and swaying at a feverish pace. Take me away on a mystical ride, moving through the veil to the other side. Fill me up with spirit songs of power and love's alive. Take me down where the pagans go, where the fires are high and the candles glow. Take me down to that magical place where they're dancing and swaying at a feverish pace. Take me away on a mystical ride, moving through the veil to the other side. Fill me up with the spirit songs of power and love's alive. Take me down through the 7 gates where I'll cast my being to the hands of fate. Take me down to the dragon's lair where myth and legend ride the air. Let me rise on the messenger's wings, let me see what the future brings. Fill me up with the spirit songs of power and love's alive. Take me down where the pagans.
And with us tonight on the phone is Lady Tamara James of the Wiccan Church of Canada. Hi, Tamara.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Many of our viewers will be hearing your name for the first time tonight. Could you please tell them a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, we operate the Wiccan Church of Canada, which is the first body to come public in Canada. And we've been going since 1979. I myself have been an initiated priestess since 1967. So we do open circles for people every week, and we do all the rites of passage, and we own and operate the occult shop as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I work with a band called Witch, which is currently having a little bit of hiatus because both the drummer and the lead guitarist have just had babies.
Yeah, that would keep people busy.
Mm.
Yeah, how did you get started in the craft?
Initially out of rebellion, actually. The 60s was a rough time in some ways, and my mother was a fairly influential person in a not-so-large town. That was Victoria, BC, and I got really tired of having to be perfect because she was, a fashion icon. So I became witchy and started hanging around coffee houses with hippies and things, and the deeper I got into that, of course, the more we got into discussing the occult, which was a very big movement back then. And then, on my birthday, actually, I was initiated into a group, which was how you got in those days. Then I got to start really learning.
Okay. And the Wiccan Church of Canada, what led you to found it?
A bunch of people who wouldn't go away, actually. It was not my idea. We sort of thought we would open an occult shop and have a little open circle in the back and maybe teach some basic classes, and that we would be able to draw a coven out of that. And we did that, but we also kind of wound up with a community that stayed. And it was someone entirely other than ourselves who got the papers and said, we need to do this. So it was as much a surprise, I think, to us as it was. And it just happened.
Yeah, I heard one story where somebody said that you were told you would just have to be elders and not have to actually run the temple.
Well, I was just going to be a figurehead. I wouldn't really have to do anything. Yeah, that was Maurice. Yeah, he was actually the first elder of the church, and we lost him some years ago to ALS. So, he's already had it out ahead of me, so he can do this to me again next life or something. But yes, figurehead is just not quite the same thing as I initially thought he might mean.
Yeah, what kind of services do you provide for the community?
Well, we do counseling. We have, as I say, the open rituals, and we do all the rites of passage. So we have the women's group does rituals for the trimesters and for croning. And we also do betrothal, which is a year and a day hand fasting. We do a full hand fasting, which is into the next life. We do funerary rites. We do a hand parting in case a hand fasting comes upon harsh waters. We do the naming of babies. And basically we really try to meet what needs have arisen. And it's kind of astonishing because a lot more people are out with their families now. And instead of, celebrating those life changes with their families and their families' churches, they're going, no, want to do it our way. And so we're finding, like, parents putting on lavish hand fastings and huge baby namings, and it's kind of like, oh, my, I didn't know. So that's really been a change over the years, for sure. Yeah.
And many of our viewers may actually be unfamiliar with the term tradition. What is your definition of tradition within witchcraft?
A tradition is a system that is definable, has initiatory, you have to be initiated to be a part of it. And it has its own inner teachings and mysteries that are revealed at that time. The WCC, or Wiccan Church of Canada, is really the open faith. And we do have priesthood who are not of the same tradition that we practice.
Right. Yeah, could you tell us about the tradition of the Wiccan Church of Canada, Odyssean?
Only that it is, in fact, a tradition that has bases of training. It does have a degree system, and with each level there is more of it is unfolded and experienced. I come out of a Gardnerian base, and so we have some similarity to that, but we've also branched off in some different directions. It's a balanced tradition.
How did it get its name?
Because we believe that each person has a journey that they take in the craft. Odysseus, was the one who made it home, and to us that journey, that is your training, your experience, your discovery. Though you have the same training as everyone else in your tradition, your experience of it is unique. And it's between you and the gods.
Right.
And so we named it after Odysseus before anybody could name it after one of us. It seemed sane at the time.
Yeah, that's the way a lot of traditions seem to have gone, being named after the people that have started them.
Yeah, and we didn't think Jamesian or Tamarian or Richardian sounded very good, so we figured we'd just take it in hand and call it Odyssean.
Okay.
But it really does fit the principle that we have, that, the initiatory rites are a shared experience. And everyone goes through the same ritual, but each person may experience it differently.
True.
And all the work that comes after, you don't have to be a certain way. You don't have to see it a certain way.
Good evening. I'm Iris Chausse, and we're here with Reverend Alicia Lyon Folberth, and we're here to talk about exactly how the temple had started. This is a great topic. And so, Alicia, how did the temple start? Well, first let's start off with, I want to go all the way back and how and why it started, but let's start, what year did it start?
1995.
1995?
Yes.
And did it start with just yourself?
No, actually, it started with a couple of us who had gotten together. The internet was just starting to take off, and I had reconnected with a few people that I hadn't seen for a while that were part of a former organization, and also to another friend that I only knew from the internet. We got together, we did a Samhain ritual in my backyard in Bridgeport, and after that we sat back and said, okay, well, this is pretty cool. We really enjoyed doing that. Where do we want to take this? And we bantered it around, because at the time that group had disbanded. And we were like, do we want to do a networking organization? No, we don't want to do that. And somebody else, was saying, well, do we just want to, let's say, maybe form a coven? We were all kind of like outsiders at that time, if you will, because we were all practicing very different things. We weren't doing traditional Wicca or even eclectic Wicca per se at that point.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we were very diverse.
Mm-hmm.
So we were kind of more pagan Unitarian at that point. So we sat down and I said, well, I'd really like to run this church. I think that'd be a great thing to do. And everybody loved the idea. And then they said, Alicia, you should be president. Well,
many years later.
yeah, I've actually kept that tradition in the church that if you volunteer an idea, it is yours. That definitely started with me, so I don't feel bad about that at all. So we sat down and we named it, and we felt that, okay, well, we'll call it pagan because we're more than one path. We'll use that as an umbrella term. Another person said, okay, well, I think maybe we should have a community center someday. What do we call it, like pagan community? And then we bantered around, should we call it church or temple? Now at the time we decided, I think temple sounds too Jewish. So, it suddenly became the Pagan Community Church, and that's what our name was for the first 5 years.
Yes.
And, we were good with that. I think it served its purpose in that particular incarnation of the temple at that point.
At that time.
Yeah, what I don't think a lot of people realize is that the community is still a very young community. When we had even still formed the church, it was the community had really just started. It was only a couple years old in the state of Connecticut. So that makes it really officially about our community about 18 years old. And, when I first started practicing 25 years ago, there wasn't anything. So this was all something very new. Now, none of us knew how to run a temple or a church or anything either. We didn't think about that. We just were so excited to start this new thing.
It's just cool.
Yeah. So we set up rules and guidelines for ourselves, what we felt we would like clergy to learn, and we went through that whole process. And at the end, I was the only person that, had not only done all the work, but actually decided to make the decision of becoming clergy. So I ended up becoming the high priestess, actually, of the temple, itself, that way. But yeah, this was all it started as a concept of, where do we go from here after that, just that one little ritual in the backyard.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it grew this big hole, Connecticut wide.
Well, I wouldn't call it Connecticut wide. We just
You're very well known in Connecticut.
Yeah.
And probably parts of Mass and New York.
Yeah. Well, we are Connecticut's first,
Yes.
Wiccan and Pagan temple.
Speak up!
And
We had orders to speak up.
yeah.
We have a habit of talking too quiet
Okay,
sometimes.
we're too quiet.
Yes.
Okay. But yeah, so I think really the whole temple concept has just really been something that's just been evolving over time.
Yes.
So and we've gone through a lot of changes since then.
When and how and why did you decide to change the name?
Oh, that was because we ran into some unusual snags. A lot of people did not like our name. Unbeknownst to me, I had no idea. And then when I found out that, some people weren't happy with it for a variety of reasons, not the least of which was just the word that it was pagan, or the fact that we were using the word church because people felt that was an oxymoron, even though it really wasn't an oxymoron. I understood that. Plus also, too, there was also an issue with public acceptance. I mean, not that there wasn't going to be a problem with public acceptance anyway, but we needed something that really needed to be definitively ours. And I had gotten very frustrated because I had actually tried to service mark the name of the church. We couldn't do it. I was told that as a nonprofit, we could not service mark because, if it's corporation, you trademark it. Because it was just too generic. And I was like, well, how did the Boy Scouts of America get there, But I guess because a lot of organizations are kind of grandfathered in as far as that goes, that they got under the wire. But not for us, though. So I sat there at one point. We already had a magazine called Pantheon. And at the bottom of a class I was writing, I just wrote Panthean. And I thought, that would make a really nice name for a tradition. So I went and I spoke with everybody else about that. What if we changed our name? Seeing that we're having some issues here, not only with some of our members, but also too with public acceptance. What do you think of the name Panthean Temple? Now, I'll be darned, just about everybody liked it.
Yes.
So I said, okay, that's great. So, that's what we decided to do. We renamed it the Panthean Temple. We did that with the state, and we've done it now with the IRS as well. So everything's changed over to the new name, and I think that it's worked out very well. And I think it's a lot easier, I think, for people to wrap their head around in some kind of strange way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Personally, I do like that name a lot better.
Yeah. And plus it's ours, it's unique.
Yes,
it is. It's not anybody else's. So that's what we were also aiming for. So now we are completely free to service market. And that's a process, and that also costs money, so we might wait on that a little bit. But yeah, so we've kind of come around too that we don't actually have a tradition named Panthean, even though we started at one point to form one. So.
But spiritually,
yeah.
How did you're able to come along this far spiritually?
You mean as far as the temple goes, or?
Yes, because you had to start out on your path,
Right.
and you got as far. Obviously, you had help along the way.
Yeah.
And they are still helping you along the way and answering in questions that you might have, not always the way, as you say, sometimes that you want it to happen.
Okay.
So I'm like spiritually, how has that helped you spiritually with signs? I'm more getting, want to know what kind of signs or symbols that you've had that know that this is right, this is what you need to do. Keeps you going, no matter what.
It's kind of strange. It's been a series of symbols, of signs, of spiritual occurrences that have happened over the course of all of this. And I have I've had a very strange ride as far as that goes. Not that that's really unique in and of itself, because I think a lot of people, when we step onto the spiritual path, we just think we're going to be spiritual and somehow that's supposed to make everything all better. Instead, we hit so many challenges that we're forced to go through. Just akin to that story about the butterfly, that you can't take it out of its chrysalis before it's done. The butterfly literally has to push its way out of the chrysalis to push the blood into its wings so it could actually fly. Because if you try and take it out of the chrysalis, it's crippled. So, we go through that same spiritual process of initiation, if you will. And I do see signs and symbols. I mean, there'll be personal ones to me. They'll be like, of horses, say.
Yes.
Or something, or somebody will come and say something to me out of the blue. And just even today, I was trying to think how I was going to have an answer to my problem. And, it's like, okay, well, I need a notebook to put this list in. And I couldn't find the other notebook, so I started scrounging around, and right near me there was another notebook that I hadn't seen for a while, but it was there. And what did it say at the top of the notebook? Use your imagination. And I was like, oh my gosh. It's little things like this, that just sort of hit you out of nowhere, And so I know sometimes that I'm on the right path just simply because I have these little road signs, and but all in all, I think it's a very hard spiritual path for so many of us. I mean, there are a lot of people that step onto the path, and in terms of just even priesthood, and when I had a friend point out to me, Alicia, of all the people that started out in a position of leadership in the pagan community, you're the last one standing. And I was like, oh dear. How did that happen? But, I think that a lot of us, we face enormous challenges, when we decide to do this. And in some sense, it's almost like things, as much as you put the energy out there, it comes back and it's like, says, how much do you want it? You'll be challenged as to whether or not you'll actually complete that journey. So,
Yes. All right.
I'm working through some barriers right now. Very big ones.
So wait for all those symbols to come in.
Well, some of them have been. Some of them
Yes.
have been. So, I have to think about those positive things. But,
You have a couple future plan ideas floating around in your head that you would like?
oh, I always have some going on. But I think one of the biggest things is that once I, get myself together, the recession's hit me very hard. Just as much as it's hit other people. And it's hit me repeatedly hard. I keep thinking I'm getting my act back together and then I don't. So that has to happen this year. But after that, we have to focus on doing some serious fundraising for the temple, just in terms of we have to have land, we have to have a building,
Yes.
We're just really at that point, because we really can't build, what we need to be able to build in terms of community, in terms of being able to give back to community, in terms of becoming really established so that people can say, okay, this is where the pagans live, in this particular corner, this is where the Wiccans live. And so that, just even, and all kind of levels, we really need to have that. So I think that is my goal for, after doing this for 15 years, for the next 15 years, is to make sure that we have it. And I don't think I can retire until that happens. So, yeah.
Alicia's goal is to be planting a garden. Yes.
That's right. I have this fantasy, if you will, that someday all I will have to do is just plant flowers in the yard at the temple, maybe run our own little version of Pagan Sunday school.
I have a feeling that's not going to happen for you.
That's going to happen either. Actually, anybody who's really, truly serious priesthood, and there are some of us, I don't think you're really allowed to retire. I don't think the gods permit you to retire. I think that once you're in, you're a lifer, and that's just the way
You'd
it
rather
is.
rest periodically in your garden.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
Yeah, every once in a while I'll have that day. No, that's Alicia's day. She's in the garden. Just leave her alone.
Now, we just had an interview, just before
Yeah.
we started speaking, we had an interview with Tamara.
Yeah, yes,
So,
we did.
explain
That
what
was Tamara James.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very glad I was able to save that. That was from a couple years ago. That was the second interview that I did with Tamara James. And it was a good interview. I wanted to be able to also, for people to hear it straight from her, what the tradition is about the Wiccan Church in Canada, too.
Yes.
Because, lots of times it's me, I'm down here in Connecticut, they're up there in Canada, and I'm trying to relay this message, to all of us. And, whereas you will say the Wiccan Church of Canada has an established culture,
Yes.
they have an established priesthood. They have, although not their own building per se, they have their own space.
Yes.
And that creates a big difference in and of itself. So, for those of us down here, it's a little hard. It's hard on me too. It's hard on my teachers, because they're up in Canada. To bring that message and everything down here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not simply a tradition effectively, it's really what we're looking at as a culture. And I think, though, no
Yes.
matter what we do, no matter how well we adhere to the tradition, I think us Americans, we always do something a little different. Even if we try so hard to do it exactly, it's...
We always have to put our little flavor, our little spice.
Yeah. So maybe that isn't a bad thing, but we've because we've had a pagan community that's grown up in this area, and I've had my hand in that. I will say that we already do have, in some sense, our own culture that has been evolving, because the community's been evolving,
Yes.
and the temples had to evolve with that growth. We couldn't very well stay the way we were, and that's something too. Because, in being pagan Unitarian per se, we never got to the meat, the good stuff. We always, funny for me being a vegetarian, but, we never got to the serious magical work. We never got deeper. We always ended up in this strange kind of tug of war between traditions, because somebody wanted to practice Norse and somebody else was kind of doing this Hindu thing and somebody else was doing Greco-Roman. And that's great and all, if we could all appreciate that and enjoy each other's rituals and the rich cultures that go behind that. But we ended up with kind of an issue of, people feeling very divided. And, this is something, a dynamic that's happened in the community over time, where people didn't have other places to go, per se. I mean, even in Margot Adler's lecture, if you listened to that a couple of weeks ago, she was talking about that there was only, a magical group, and whatever they were practicing was whatever you were practicing. You didn't have, maybe some kind of cultural decision to make, There wasn't necessarily an Irish or an Italian or, a Norse kind of tradition necessarily that was going on where you could choose another cultural flavor, or even Reconstructionism.
Yes.
Reconstructionism is new. And, when I was doing Celtic Reconstructionism, I didn't even know what to call it because, I was a Reconstructionist.
Yes.
So it was a very strange place to be, to start building effectively, your own tradition out of, bits and pieces. And, realizing, that I was a Reconstructionist, all these years later. So, but one of the great things, the reason why the Wiccan Church of Canada and the tradition of Odyssean is such a great fit, is that we have this wonderful, beautiful tradition where you can go deeper, where you've got the classes that are standardized. Everybody gets the exact same thing. But, nobody dictates deity.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody dictates the pantheon that you work with. So, even in that sense, the rituals really can vary up at the Wiccan Church of Canada because they do them on the Saturdays and the Sundays, depending on which temple you go to. And each one of them can be very different from one another.
Yes.
So...
The same outline's the same, though, right?
Well, you've still got the core tradition to work with. You've still got the teachings to work with. So, you may have somebody who says, well, I want to do like a Reconstructionist style ritual of some sort, that weekend, and yeah, they'll do it. Because people are really researching, the cultures now, and they're finding out what they did, in some sense, and they're bringing that forward.
Yes. We're all still learning.
Yeah.
Yes.
So really, in a sense, is even though they're having the public services, the core, the tradition of the priesthood is still Odyssean. There are people that are multiple traditions within the Wiccan Church of Canada. They may practice something different than their coven, with their coven than they say they would necessarily do with the Wiccan Church of Canada.
Yes.
And I think that they are, in some sense, Canadians, at least they are less competitive than we are here.
Really?
Yeah, so I think that they're a lot more relaxed in that than we are. But people, they have tremendous choices now, and I think that's great. It just, it's hard though, I think sometimes, not in terms of traditions, but in terms of personality issues and what people are looking for, because I really truly wish, of all the things that at Harry Potter, that we had a sorting hat for the pagan community. So you knew exactly where anybody needed to go. You could say, hey, you belong with this group, or hey, you belong with that group, and it would just solve everything right from the get-go.
Yes.
Yeah, and even in that, I think Harry Potter has actually done a tremendous service in terms of, talking, even if it is fantasy-based, about witches and wizards and things.
It really helped culture understand it's not
Yeah.
taboo. TV always made it out to
No, and it made it safe, it made it fun.
be. What about the show Charmed? That kind of really popularized it even before, I think Harry Potter did.
I think anything that's too hokey,
Yes.
that doesn't have ethics somewhere at its core,
That's true. You're very right.
isn't doing us any
Yes.
good. If it has ethics at its core, I'm there. It's the only witch movie I still like is Practical Magic. And that was written by, the book was written by a witch, so.
Was it really?
Yeah.
That's why.
That's the reason
No,
why
it
I
had
said-
to be, because
yeah.
when you watch it, you know.
You know.
Yes, you know. You know
We have
something
our own
other-
culture
yes,
going
yes,
on,
yes.
And I think that perhaps in some sense, I don't think perhaps the outside world really necessarily understands that, but.
Yes.
you-
But we do not have roses growing over people.
No.
Or frogs coming out of the ground.
No. The rose is a very ancient symbol and it's sacred to the goddess.
Yes.
And I really, even with the name that I had of my old store, which is now out of business, Sub Rosa Magic, Under the Rose, that was where everything was to be kept secret,
Yes.
Sub Rosa. In terms of magic, that's the way things were kept. That also had to do with, those earliest initiatory mysteries, is that they were wearing crowns of roses, on their head. And, even this is something that got passed down for such the longest time, that even down into Victorian times, they were painting roses on the ceiling in places where, let's say, people might have a party, to remind them that everything was under the rose, and whatever was said there stayed there. So, the rose has a lot of deep meanings, but, it's, in some level, I think that really one has to participate, in what it is, the spirituality and the rituals and all, to really get an understanding of what it is we do, because otherwise they'll always be on the outside looking in.
Yes, yes.
And it's not anything terribly hard to understand. It's actually very easy to understand. It's just people have to make the mental jump and just be open-minded,
Yes. So you have, not only do you have the Panthean Temple, but you also have the community. As a community, you have, let's say the sound ritual is open to the community.
Right.
So it's able to get more people from the community in to be able to understand. And anybody's welcome.
Right.
Like the Beltaine Festival.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, this year's Beltaine is going to be more of a community kind of grassroots festival.
Yes, yes.
Because of the recession, because I've had those setbacks even in my own life, and things have not come together on a lot of levels for a lot of us. I think that it's better this year that we actually focus on building community, on rebuilding our community, and bringing more people in. I mean, it's very easy at a big festival to get lost in the crowd. I think to really build community, it really requires a lot of one-on-one. And, Tamara and Richard coming down, that means that we actually get to spend real quality time with them at a Beltaine festival for a change. Rather than them running around doing rituals and classes and everything else, and us not even being able to get to them because, we're running around being staff.
That's what I'm saying about the temple has community involvement in it.
Yes, it does.
It's not just whoever belongs to the temple's there.
No. Now, what I started doing, and this is where we started for a little while to almost form our own tradition, is that, there was a great need. I had already gone onto the Odyssean path, and I had started with my first teacher, but I went on to meet Tamara and Richard and make it official. But we had a real need at that point because, there was, as I was talking about before, that tug of war, that strange dynamic about traditions and things and not going deeper. I kind of decided to take everything by the reins, and I decided I was forming an outer court with the intention of forming an inner court. And in that sense, I set up the classes so that people would be learning every month, and, I gave people an awful lot, and even that, I think, in some sense wasn't enough, so I developed even more classes on top of that. So we really have gone through quite a learning process. Now that we're also, we went from that to becoming more fully Odyssean, we're now kind of fitting even what I have been teaching in with the tradition, and as time goes on and we are elevated within the tradition, that more and more of that will be filtering into the temple. So it's been something that we've been building, and really just the focus of even working on the inner court, the Coven of the temple, to be able to make sure that we refill the well, to remember that we can do the deeper work. That's something that I think that we need to do for a while. Tamara and Richard actually had a priesthood coven for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think probably one of those dynamics, and I'm sure they'll correct me if I'm wrong, might be the fact that they grew so much. Us, we're still very intimate, since the store had actually closed, and that was where we were holding many of our classes and workshops and rituals.
It's still pretty new, though.
Yeah.
It really is.
Well, in terms of, us getting together and really forming the inner court, we've gotten close to being a true functioning inner court coven for a while, but this time, I want to take it to the next level, and, where people actually reach the neophyte level. That's the place, where it gets closed. So, we can spend a lot of time learning from each other, but the people that are really serious, that are going to form the core, this nucleus of the temple, with the tradition, that needs to be very solid. So, when people I've had plenty of people write me and say, Alicia, can I be your student? And it's like, I tell them to read. One of the first things that I do, I tell them to read The Heart of Wicca by Ellen Cannon Reed. And
Excellent book.
It is an excellent book. And then I expect to hear back from them. And it's so strange because so many people don't even get to that process of reading the book, but they want to come to classes. And my comfort level has been, because I've had so much going on in my life, to just focus on people who are really serious, who want to do that magical work, who want to be a part of in-court, that want to be priesthood. And I'm sure that with some time we'll end up doing public classes again somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But for right now, that's really been my comfort level, and that's been what I think I've really needed to do. And I think that I also got trapped onto this idea of this little hamster wheel, where, I kept just running around, gotta do Beltaine, gotta teach, gotta do this ritual, and it's like, it just gets kind of insane after a while. So I have to focus on myself a little bit more.
Yes, yeah.
And I don't have anything to offer other people if I can't take care of myself, so.
Yeah. So that's part of your next year. So you just explained the whole entire future that you have planned.
Well, a little bit, I'm pretty adaptable. I think that's one of the keys to surviving is really just adaptability. Our community is going to keep growing. It's going to keep changing. The dynamics are going to keep changing. What people want, what people need, that's going to keep changing. We've gone from nothing in the state of Connecticut to starting to form community, to being very eclectic, to people branching off into different traditions. And we might come together at, let's say, things like big festivals and whatnot. But for the most part, when even in terms of, the greater pagan community, there's a lot of us now, a whole lot of us now. But we're all very fractured. We're all in different areas. And a lot of people aren't teaching, or they're just teaching, really privately, where you can't even find them.
Yes, yeah.
You have to really hunt them down. So, it'll be interesting to see where it actually goes from here, because I know that I can only fulfill my role,
Mm-hmm.
and anybody else, they'll have to fulfill theirs as far as it goes. But yeah, a lot of things I think are going to keep changing. I think really too, one of the things that's going to keep changing is just the need for spiritual growth. I mean, yes, people have been sorting themselves out and deciding what traditions they want, but as we all get older, I don't think that anyone who spends any time in a position of leadership in the pagan community cannot help but be affected by the fact of all the work that they do, if they are actually doing the real spiritual work. And I'm not talking about, putting on the witchy poos and going out and doing public circle for everybody to see. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about doing all the really hard work where you have to roll up your shirt sleeves effectively and you got to take care of people.
All the behind the scenes
Oh,
work
yes.
that nobody knows or sees what's going on.
Yeah, the stuff that isn't for show.
Yeah.
I think that is very important. I was actually at Z Budapest, and in one of her books she was talking about, that work and power are in balance with each other. It's a very strange dynamic that people are looking for more empowerment maybe in their lives, but they don't want to work. And you can't get to that other place if you're not willing to work, if you're not self-directed at all, if you kind of sort of let yourself float wherever the universe takes you. It's not going to happen. You have to be able to be willing to put in the work. And, just even for myself, I am not the same person I was when I started, at all. Yeah. It's taken me on a very strange journey, but there was a time when I was very quiet. There was time I really wouldn't speak unless I was spoken to. There was a time I would be absolutely terrified to get up and do public speaking. I couldn't do that. And I mean, when I first started doing it, I'm sure I was terrible, but people were nice to me. And they let me learn. Just even in terms of the spiritual growth that I've had to do. Oh my gosh, I'm in a very different place now than I was before.
So spiritually you've grown too. You've grown as
Yeah.
a person, spiritually you've grown, you've learned a lot.
I've learned a tremendous amount.
Yes, because you had to start this church, you also had to grow up spiritually very quickly in every way. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
You learn a lot of things the hard way.
That's it, and I think for a lot of us who were first starting out in the community when it was forming, we all had to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. I mean, just even in terms of traditional craft or any other, pagan tradition that's more formal. This all came about like real recently.
Yes.
We didn't have that early on. So even for my first teacher, we were discussing earlier,
Yes.
before we came on the TV, that Audra had found me in the parking lot of DMV, and she knew that she was supposed to stand by that most particular car, and she actually waited for me to come out, and that was my first teacher.
Because she got stuck in Connecticut and
Yes.
for Alicia.
It's kind of
Not
like
knowing,
that.
That's kind of what it seems like.
I had put it out to the universe after I had started the Pagan Community Church. It's like, oh my gosh, what have I got myself into? These are some big shoes I got to fill. And I realized I was totally unprepared for the work that I had to do, It became very clear very quickly how much work it was that I had to do. And so when I put it out into the universe for a teacher, I didn't quite expect that I would just be sent one, but I was sent one, and I'm going to have to confirm with her how she got stuck.
Way.
But yeah, it was only about 2.5 months after I did that that she was there.
Where'd you meet your teacher? At the DMV, thank you.
Well, it does make sense.
Yes.
My goddess, a goddess of horses, she rules transportation.
That's all, you're right.
Yeah, so, she takes you where you need to be. And yeah, I would needed to register a car, and that's why I was there that day. I wasn't aware that the dying of the last car would bring me to that place.
I think that was the most awesome story. I really do. I love hearing it.
Well, it's the strange, the
Yes.
synchronicity and the serendipity and the coincidence that all kind of go together, but they do.
Yes.
So it was meant to happen for a reason. But I will tell you, I think one of the things that I also too fell in love with the tradition is just the shocking amount of depth that there is to it. Tamara and Richard have created a tradition out of Alexandrian and Gardnerian, and plus they also have public circle, which changes the dynamic of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably wouldn't realize exactly how this tradition really fits together until that you realize the tradition actually fits inside the temple, where you've got the public services going on, you've got the public classes going on. There are public rites that they do, things like, hand fastings and baby blessings and things. Things that traditional craft people don't do. They don't do all this public stuff, Plus there's also now a laity, which back in the day, there wasn't a laity. Either you were initiated or you weren't. And now we have a lot of people that I think probably through the sale of a lot of popular books have come into the craft, and maybe they haven't gotten the best idea of what craft is because they might have been reading the wrong books, because it was meant to make money for the company that sold them and for the authors that wrote them. that was maybe not what it was all about. So, again, we have the whole sorting hat thing going on. That's one of the reasons why I want people to read The Heart of Wicca. Ellen Cannon Reed has since passed away, but it was a good book in terms of it being an easy, simple book, and yet it's complicated in the sense that it talks about all the subjects that you normally don't talk about. It talks about things like student-teacher relationship, things like initiation, what might be expected of you, what degree systems are all about, working through the Sabbats, the whole wheel, the year.
You don't
what's it
find
all
this
about.
in any other book.
And it's
Explain this
it's
any
in
other
just
book.
this little itty bitty
It
book.
is a really small book. It is a really small book. When you read that book,
Yeah.
you're like, wow, I never knew.
Yeah.
It really explains things in a different light.
Yeah.
And that's how you know that if you read the book and it's not your cup of tea, then.
Yeah, people, I asked them about the book afterwards, what they liked, what they didn't like. And, that gives me an opportunity to open up the conversation, because a lot of times people, they don't really know where they're at. They think, maybe I want to learn, maybe I want to do ritual, maybe I want to join a coven. But in some sense, I'm not really sure if we might be the right group for them. If even personality-wise, we might be the right group for them. That's a big part of it, Can you work with the other people in the group? Because, we're not just a teaching group per se, or a teaching coven per se. We're an actual working, functioning, magical group. This is where we're building towards. So, we as we go also too deeper with the tradition, the more that we can actually use that to also go deeper for ourselves within the coven. And that's a good place to shoot for, but not everybody can do that kind of work with you. That person that's with you really has to feel almost like they are family, even just upon entry into the group. People have a lot of things that they have to work out, personal issues, their own dynamics when you come into a group. It's truly a relationship, but it's not your typical relationship, because people think about family relationships, or they think about, marriage relationships. But, we aren't really taught in this culture to work and function together as a team, to function as a unit. We live in a very individualistic society, one where the focus is on the individual rather than the group. So I think that even makes it more of a jump, because when you're working with a coven, you are working with a group, and it is not about the individual anymore, it's about the group.
Yes.
And people have to shut that off.
When you're in the group comes first.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, family comes first,
Yeah, I meant in
everybody.
the group.
But in the group.
In the group.
In the group.
Yes.
Perfect love and perfect trust aren't just simply watchwords or keywords, or something that you gain entrance to a coven with in a ritual. That really has to be there, because the magic does not work if you have to look over your shoulder and say, can I trust that person?
Mm-hmm.
Can you trust them with your life?
Yes.
If the answer is no, well, you probably shouldn't be doing magical work with them, because the magic happens on such a deep, intimate level that I don't think that people are really used to that, because in some sense, it's a different kind of intimacy, but, just as genuine with working with a magical group as, let's say, maybe they would say, be spending time with their lover. People don't necessarily think about it in those terms. It's a different kind of relationship.
Yes.
But it's a very intimate one, because you're sharing that spiritual side of yourself, a really vulnerable side of yourself, that maybe you don't share with a lot of other people, maybe not even your own family.
Yes, exactly.
And for many years, that's the way it was. People did not share this side of themselves, with their family. So now that we're out of the broom closet, if you will, a lot of that's changing. And I think I'm watching it change each and every about 5 years,
Yes.
people's perceptions of it, that we've gone from them not even knowing we were here.
Yes.
Maybe us not knowing what we were doing either. To, suddenly, people starting to realize that we were there, and they thought we were all crazy. But then they seem to have gotten over that. They don't freak out anymore. I think because of the movies, a little bit from Charmed. But, definitely from Harry Potter and some other positive things. Because, now they're like, oh, aren't those like those witch people,
Before it was like this, now they're like, oh, tree huggers.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, once you realize there really are a bunch of tree huggers, and we're spiritual, and, even though people have been very accepting of, like, Eastern concepts, I don't think necessarily they've understood the magical concepts. I think probably one of the biggest hurdles I think people still have to get over is what we do for ritual or for spell work. It really all it is an active form of prayer.
Yes, that's what I explain to people.
Yeah.
You go to church, do you light a candle?
Yeah.
Well, I light a candle too, maybe a couple more. But, you know,
Yeah.
it is a form of prayer. That's what I explained, you know.
When it really comes right down to it, if people are used to high ritual in a church, a Christian church, I don't think that if they came to one of our circles, I don't think they'd feel completely out of place. I think they would feel out of place in the sense of, you know, where you're used to watching maybe a priest do everything.
Yes.
But they're not used to actually being actively engaged or involved.
Yes.
And that's the whole thing. That's where the dynamics
Priest
change.
lights
We're
the
involved.
incense and all that. You know, you have a lot of the same things. Believe it or not,
Right.
we are very different in some ways, but we have a lot of things that are similar too.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things I was addressing the other spiritual side, the fact that we don't need an intermediary,
Yes.
that we do actually commune, you know, with our deities in whatever form that takes. You know, like for myself, I do divination, and I've been doing that for a very long time. I do tarot. I actually have a little blog talk radio thing that I do,
Yes.
and it's been growing. I've been surprised. A lot of people have been
Quickly.
listening in. It's got the same name that my old store did. It's pretty cool. People call in every week and for free. You know, I'll give them a reading on the air, and I get to help a whole lot of people that way. Yeah, I was able, and I'm very grateful for being able to extend the show an extra hour, so you know, I can actually talk to more people.
It
And
goes by so quickly.
it does. It does.
I've listened to the show.
The TV show here goes by quickly, but it really comes right down to it.
It
It
really
doesn't
does.
take long at all. You know, I
You mean
think.
it's been an hour.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So, speaking of, well, what do you mean it's only been an hour? We already talked our whole time away.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
so-
for talking to us tonight, Alicia.
Okay.
This was excellent. I
Yeah.
really like this.
Yeah, and thank you for doing the interview. This is really cool.
Keepers of the Flame is produced by the Panthean Temple. If you have enjoyed this show, please consider donating to the Panthean Temple. We are a 501c3 nonprofit temple and the first Wiccan and Pagan temple in the state of Connecticut. It is our dream to someday have land in a building. Please help us achieve this goal. And for more information about us and our events, please go to our website at www.pantheontemple.org. Please visit paganodyssey.com for Beltaine, a Pagan Odyssey Festival, Connecticut's oldest and original pagan festival by the Panthean Temple. And please visit Keepers of the Flame at our new website at www.keepersoftheflametv.com. And for more information about the Wiccan Church of Canada, please visit www.wcc.on.ca.
Take me down to the 7 gates of cast my beam to the hands of fate. Take me down to the dragon's lair where myth and legend ride the air. Let me rise on the messenger's wings. Let me see what the future brings. Fill me up with the spirit songs of power and love's alive. Take me down where the pagans go, where the fires are high and the candles glow. Take me down to the magical place where the dancing and swaying at a feverish pace. Take me away on a mystical ride, moving through the veil to the other side. Fill me up with spirit songs of power and love's alive. Take me down where the pagans go, where the fires are high and the candles glow. Take me down to that magical place where the dancing and swaying at a feverish pace. Take me away on a mystical ride, moving through the veil to the other side. Fill me up with the spirit songs of power and love's alive. Take me down through the 7 gates where I'll cast my being to the hands of fate. Take me down to the dragon's lair where myth and legend ride the air. Let me rise on the messenger's wings. Let me see what the future brings. Fill me up with the spirit songs of power and love's alive. Take me down where the pagans go, where the fires are high and the candles glow. Take me down to that magical place where the dancing and swaying at a feverish pace. Take me away on a mystical ride, moving through the veil to the other side. Fill me up with the spirit songs of power